Is Jessica Huseman, Executive Director for Votebeat, a nonprofit news organization reporting on voting access and election administration across the United States. Boy, is that an important issue each election cycle. Jessica, thank you for being here. So conservative groups have been pushing for more citizenship checks. In Arizona, what are the state and local laws?
Sure. So Arizona is a really interesting state on this. So while most states have one type of registration and you are registered to vote in both federal and state elections, in Arizona that's split. There have been federal court rulings that you cannot require people to show documentary proof of citizenship when they register to vote, but Arizona does require that for its state races. So if you've not presented that documentary proof of citizenship, you will be issued a ballot with only federal races, including the president and the House and the Senate. You will not be presented with state races at all. There are about 40,000 people that applies to, and an analysis we did in in December shows that those are mostly college students, right? That live on college campuses and probably just don't have access to their passport because it's at home. It's an interesting issue, and Arizona is a really interesting state on this topic.
Right, and we've seen a lot of engagement among young voters since Kamala Harris got into the race, and because we've seen so many changes, so maybe that number is fluctuating. Mail-in voting, Jessica, had plenty of controversy in Arizona back in 2020. What is the confidence level that those problems are worked out and we won't see a repeat in 2024?
I think that election administrators that we're talking to there feel really good about the upcoming election. 2020 was a absolute avalanche for vote by mail. Even though Arizona was doing a lot of vote by mail during the pandemic, they had to do so much more of it. And so now that those are no longer the conditions and people are much more likely to vote in person, we'll probably see less vote by mail. But I think that the issues that we saw in 2020 have also sort of been worked out in the last 4 years.
What is the process when it comes to certifying an election in Arizona?
So the counties have to do that individually, and courts have ruled very consistently that this is basically a formality. If clerks do not certify in Arizona, they could face criminal charges. I'm sorry, if supervisors do not certify in Arizona, they could face criminal charges. The Cochise County had two Republican supervisors that attempted to refuse to certify in the last midterm, and they faced criminal charges and then ultimately did certify the election. So while there's a big talk about, refusing to certify, I really don't think that any of the supervisors in any of Arizona's counties are going to be willing to stomach criminal charges.
Interesting. What are some of the trends at Votebeat that you all are noticing when it comes to Arizona voters right now and the tightness of the race there?
Arizona is such a fascinating place. It is always tight. It is always such a purple state. And I think one of the things that we're noticing is that Trump is going really hard there because he sort of feels personally angry about having lost Arizona before. You'll remember it was sort of the first swing state to fall for Trump in 2020. Fox News, what he viewed as a very friendly station, called it first. And so his campaign is sort of spending more there than they might otherwise. But the Harris campaign is responding in kind. The second gentleman will be there today in Tucson as well. And so I think that we're watching the people who are sort of on the margins in Arizona really struggling with the choice between Trump and Harris.
Right, and that includes young voters, as you talked about, and also Latino voters. We've seen that voting bloc increase. About 29% of the voters there are Latino. Jessica Huseman with Votebeat, thanks for the information and for the historical perspective. Appreciate it. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.